just can't stay blue. You changed my life.
It's interesting to think about how one is initiated into a life of music. Really, music is a calling, and it's not something you choose, it chooses you. I do believe that the calling of a musician comes with a healthy amount of narcissism, because you really do have to believe in you sort of disproportionately. When you say, well, I'm just going to get up there and play, you know, you don't even realize at the time, again, and for me, officially I was 12 when I started saxophone, but I was already trying to play whatever I could. But you know, I'm just going to walk up and stand in front of these people here at church, in this case, and play, you know. And I didn't have like 2 or 3 lessons on the horn. And so you look back at that, and there's a certain naivete that you know, mingle with your narcissism, that, you know, God put those things in us so that the calling on our lives could come to fruition. Because what happens is that then you start to figure it out. You're like, oh, dang, okay, these people can really play. And in fact, it takes some falling on your butt. It's like learning how to ice skate, right? I went out for an all-West Tennessee band, you know, in Memphis, and thinking, you know, as a 13-year-old, I'll just walk in here and just play. You know, I hadn't really practiced the music. And sure enough, I didn't make a single chair, you know, like first chair, second chair, third chair, no chair. And it occurred to me at that point, it's like, oh, wow, you actually do have to practice this stuff. Well, that was a big revelation. And so now I'm 56, and I'm still working diligently on the instrument. Absolutely, there is I think a void in the area of you know, resources and opportunities for aspiring musicians. Now, that's not to say that these young creative brothers and sisters are not going around that, and they're finding ways to express their creativity. You know, again, we harken back to the beginning of hip hop, where, you know, though that wasn't my generation, what I understand is that they didn't really have, you know, like when I went to school, you know, in 1971, you know, to junior high school, I was given an instrument, and I could pick, you know, and it didn't matter what neighborhood it came from, the income. You get this instrument, you take it home, and it worked, you know. It was a really good instrument. Well, that did not happen for the next generation, and so then you had a generation of kids, or 2 generations, where, you know, well, man, I got this music in me, and so what am I going to do? So you sort of, you know, stitch together a means, a venue, I guess, a media, a medium of communication or creativity, and thus hyper creative music called hip hop, you know, hit the scene. And so I'm not mad about that, but I am mad that some of those same people were not given the opportunity to learn an instrument, because it's a completely different thing. You know, again, I'm back to the videographer. So if I take my iPod or iPhone and video something, that's one thing, but it's another complete thing to know the ins and outs of lighting and all those studies, those sciences that go into you know, making music or making films and all that. So yeah, I'm kind of still, you know, an advocate for that, for people investing in kids learning the arts, you know.
Keep on pushing. Keep on pushing. Keep on pushing. Keep on pushing.
the fertile, creatively fertile, culturally fertile soil of the Mississippi Delta and the Mid-South and the South in general. First, you have to begin with the premise that much of pop culture is rooted in black culture. So it's a subculture, that informs the rest of pop culture. If you want to find the genesis, the incubator of black culture, then, it's just follow slavery, the history of that. And you got Virginia, and then you got Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee, et cetera, Georgia. And so Memphis really ended up being, Atlanta to some extent, but Memphis ended up being kind of the New York of the South when it came to black culture. Like, if you were a blues artist, i.e. B.B. King, and you wanted to make it, guess what? You had to come to Memphis, and Beale Street in particular. And, it was that place where you either sink or swim. And, the competition was fierce. And I remember Albert King once said, my name's Albert King. You might want to learn my name. And we play the blues, and you might want to learn a little something about that, too, because we're going to be around. And he was right, not just them and not just blues in particular, but the influence of that music and of that region is ubiquitous. And it goes through every single genre. Iggy Azalea, Justin Timberlake. I mean, you can't get around it. Certainly not rock and roll. People say, well, rock and roll is not that. That's the British invasion. Like, the British invasion was invading Memphis, trying to figure out, well, how did Muddy Waters do that? And surely he's rich. Let me try to meet him. And of course, Muddy Waters, like, part-time musician. He's over there, painting not a picture, painting somebody's house, So that, I think, the premise that black culture is the starting point, and then one is able to, disseminate what it means to be a B.B. King coming from Memphis.
Shine on me, love is the answer. Shine on us all, set us free. Love is the answer. Light of the world, shine.
Yes, when I, accepted the calling of being a musician, it was absolutely in the context of a family that had been known for music. My grandfather, both my grandmothers, my uncle Wendell, I'm named after him, Kirk Whalum. My uncle was dean of music at Morehouse. So when you heard the Morehouse Glee Club, that was my uncle's arrangements. And I remember being in Japan, by the way. I was in Tokyo about 20 years ago, and I went to this church, and they were playing this lovely arrangement. I look in the hymn book, it's arranged by Wendell Whalum, So it's that part of it is very humbling and it gives me a great deal of pride. And yet I was determined when I went off to college at Texas Southern in Houston that I was going to carve my own path. So I was trying not to be a Whalum as much as, what can you do? And so I worked really hard at it. But now I look around, and not just my Uncle Peanuts, who's now 87, was featured on the Gospel According to Jazz, a couple of chapters, and as well, I was able to produce a record on him, and he sang on my Romance language, and he was my inspiration. I mean, he's forgotten more about jazz music, than I have yet to learn. Plays amazingly on saxophone, piano, vocals, trumpet. But now I look around, and so my son, my wife and I have a son, have 4 kids, and our oldest boy is out touring, playing country and western. My son plays with Billy Currington. So my son is on a retainer. So if he's not on the road, he's still making money. And he's in Nashville writing country songs. And, he talked to me yesterday, cats in the cradle. He's like, yeah, Dad, I'm in Baltimore. We're all laying out on the floor in the airport because we can't get to New York, because of the weather. And so it's like the story reproduces itself. And then my nephew Kenneth is touring with Maxwell and Ludacris and has his own incredible career, trip hop, jazz, whatever you call it, Bad Brother. Nephew Cortland, New York, singing, Bad Cat, he's on my record. And then my nephew Cameron was busy. He could not make the Gospel According to Jazz because he was touring with Bruno Mars. So he's the Uptown Funk, now for 4 years, 5 years, I think. So yeah, that Whalum part is pretty cool, and it is, to me, is something that one is able to look at the African spirituality. As a Christian, I am now really grateful to have learned more about African spirituality, that it is about the ancestors, that our spirituality is much like our knowledge of self and our history is passed on, is passed down, not so much written in books. In fact, very seldom written in books. It's passed down through the griot and the elders. Finally, I'll say that starting the Gospel According to Jazz series was about making lemonade, because I was handed some lemons from a company named Columbia Records. They said, basically it was kind of unceremonious, like I was just dropped, and they said, "Oh, that meeting, oh, that's canceled, and you're dropped." But my wife caught me that day when I got the news, and she said, "Okay," it's almost like, what can you do today that you couldn't do yesterday when you were a Columbia recording artist? And so just my train went, and my pity party was canceled. And I said, I know exactly what I would do, because I know they wouldn't have been into this idea at all. I would do a series called The Gospel According to Jazz, and I would ask my partners and people that I love and respect, like Jonathan Butler, like George Duke, like Paul Jackson Jr., like Doc Powell, and on this record, Shalea, Norman Brown, Rick Braun, our brother Kevin, Gerald Veasley, these great artists who are not known as gospel artists, but have this incredibly impactful music that is spiritual. Some Christians, quote unquote, some not, but all very much legitimate expression of God's grandeur in improvisation and this music we call jazz. So that's how the series got started.
That's what I love when I read the script. There's two ordinary women who find themselves in a circumstance that require them to be extraordinary, and that they do it.